Welcome to the Common Man Football Show. My name is James Coburn, and today's episode, we're talking about the New Orleans Saints 2018 NFL Draft Class based on analytics. So we're essentially going to go through every single pick, looking at these players based on their production and athleticism data to come to some sort of conclusion in terms of how good they could become at the NFL level long term. So again, this video essentially is looking at what past players had in terms of traits on paper, and do any of the players that the Saints drafted, do they have any similarities with what past players had in terms of their traits? So if you're new to the channel and new to the work that I do, all terms and definitions will be in the description. With all that stuff out of the way, let's get to the Saints draft class. So starting with the first pick of the draft, of course, you have Marcus Davenport, edge rusher out of UTSA. When you look at his production data, he had a 97.44 solo tackle score, 91.05 sack score, and a 94.59 tackle for loss score. Pretty much hits all-pro potential to Pro Bowl potential production traits. So very, very productive player. There is some question marks in terms of his level of competition because he put up this type of production at UTSA and not necessarily at like Alabama or something like that. But definitely still strong production no matter where you play. And when you get to his athleticism traits, 66.52 in terms of explosiveness, 93.41 in terms of his speed, and 93.09 in terms of flexibility for his size. Essentially has Pro Bowl level athleticism traits. You look at him from an explosive speed and flexibility standpoint. And I think in many ways that's what you're looking at, is pretty much a Pro Bowl level athlete in terms of the position. I think it was a pretty big reach to take a guy like this, you know, to give up a first rounder to essentially get a guy like this. But does he have a good chance of becoming a long-term starter or better? Absolutely. But I do think that he is someone where you might have given up a little too much for him because of some of the risks with him because of being a smaller school guy. Then of course you get to Traquan Smith, wide receiver out of Central Florida. When you look at his production data, he had a 74.60 passing yardage market share production score, which pretty much hits the 3-time Pro Bowl threshold and the long-term starter threshold. Doesn't quite hit the 3-time All-Pro or 5-time All-Pro area, but when we look at the averages at the position, it makes it a little bit clearer that this is a guy that may not be, is probably not going to be an All-Pro / Pro Bowl wide receiver, but definitely pretty darn close to the starter average of 81.45. And when you look at his athleticism traits, he had an 88.49 explosive lower body strength score, 72.63 speed score, and a 43.86 flexibility score. And when it comes to wide receivers, you only need one 54 or higher athleticism trait in order to have All-Pro / Pro Bowl potential. And Traquan Smith has 2 athleticism traits indicative of an All-Pro / Pro Bowl wide receiver. So definitely a good shot that Traquan Smith either becomes a long-term starter, and highest in upside is most likely a Pro Bowler. And of course you get to Rick Leonard, offensive guard out of Florida State. When you look at his athleticism testing, he only did one major thing in terms of explosive lower body strength score, which is a 74.07, which pretty much hits above the All-Pro threshold and Pro Bowl threshold when it comes to guards. And but unfortunately, there's not a lot else to say about him because he didn't do the speed score, the 40-yard dash, and he didn't really do the short shell and 3-cone. It's kind of hard to really determine much with him, other than the fact that he does have very good explosiveness traits. Then, of course, we get to Natrell Jamerson, defensive safety out of Wisconsin. When you get to his production data, he had a 23.42 solo tackle score, 43.59 interception score, and a 76.87 pass deflection score. It doesn't quite look like a All-Pro / Pro Bowl safety because of his solo tackle data, which is the only sort of major question mark. But he does have at least Pro Bowl level interception and pass deflection data. Solo tackle data is the only issue here. And when you look at the averages at the position, it does make it clear that he does lack in terms of solo tackle data and in terms of interception data to a certain extent as well, when you look at the averages at the position. But he does have some good athleticism traits. 58.51 in terms of explosiveness, 94.06 in terms of speed for his size, and 67.70 in terms of flexibility. Even here, it doesn't really look like an All-Pro / Pro Bowl level safety, but does look at least like a starter safety, when it comes to the bottom and thresholds. Ultimately, though, his production and his athleticism says that it may not be as likely that he becomes a long-term starter, maybe more of a backup, but definitely not a horrible profile, just something where there's a lot of question marks in terms of his production and question marks in terms of his athleticism traits for him to hit high-quality outcomes. Then, of course, you get to Cameron Moore, quarterback out of Boston College. When you look at his production data, he had a 43.84 solo tackle score and a 54.75 pass deflection score. pretty much when you look at the average solo tackle score and the average pass deflection score, he doesn't look that fantastic, which is the only sort of issue. And when you look at his athleticism data, he does have some positives here, 87.85 in terms of explosiveness and 71.57 in terms of speed. But again, the only major issue with him is that I think you're looking at a guy that has a chance to become a long-term starter based on his athleticism testing, but his production data is very concerning. I think it would be, it's one of those situations where he does have good athleticism, but the production does say that it might be pretty surprising if he was to become a long-term starter, and also even more surprising if he was to become a Pro Bowl and All-Pro cornerback. Then, of course, you get to Boston Scott, running back out of Louisiana Tech. When you get to his production data, at a 46.58 market share production score, which doesn't really hit the All-Pro threshold, the 5-time Pro Bowl threshold, or the 3-time Pro Bowl threshold. And when you look at the average scores, average All-Pro score, average Pro Bowl score, and average starter score, Boston Scott also doesn't really hit close to those areas, but he does have some good athleticism traits. 64.50 in terms of explosiveness, 79.35 in terms of speed, and 93.13 in terms of flexibility for his size. When it comes to the running back position, you only need one 79 or higher athleticism trait in order to have All-Pro Pro Bowl potential, and he has 2 in speed and flexibility. I think it's unlikely that he ends up becoming a long-term starter or a multiple All-Pro and Pro Bowl running back because of his production data, but he could have a very similar or at least productive career in the Saints offense, which usually likes to use different types of committee backs and stuff like that. So I do think that Boston Scott will have some success as a rotational player. It's just he's a guy who's very unlikely to become like the main cog of the Saints offense. Then, of course, we get to Will Clapp, offensive guard out of LSU. Based on his athleticism traits, he had a 60.24 explosive lower body strength score, 36.12 speed score, and a 30.70 flexibility score. Does not hit all the All-Pro thresholds he needs to hit, nor the Pro Bowl thresholds he needs to hit in terms of All-Pro and Pro Bowl potential, but does hit at least above the starter threshold. But when you look at the averages at the position, he is below the average starter speed score and below what the average flexibility score is as well. So he is someone that could become a long-term starter, but he is someone who is in many ways unathletic, and there is a question mark when you take players like that at any point in the draft. In terms of how well they'll translate. So overall, when you look at the New Orleans Saints draft class, I think this is it's not terrible. It's not the best either. I think when you look at Marcus Davenport, you are going to get a guy who ends up becoming a successful edge rusher. I mean, based on most of the data, he has the production, he has the athleticism traits in order to translate. Traquan Smith has a good shot at becoming a long-term starting wide receiver. Rick Leonard has some question marks, but he does have at least some potential to be a long-term starting guard. Jamerson most likely will be a backup to rotational type guy. Moore could become a long-term starter, but also there's a lot of question marks in terms of his ability to become that because of his production data. Boston Scott will most likely become a rotational player, and Will Clapp also most likely will be a rotational player. So again, not a terrible draft. There are some pieces here that are very interesting and intriguing. But there's definitely a lot of players that will have to break the mold of what their data says about them, which is kind of the bottom line when it comes to the Saints draft. And of course, my name is James Coburn. You can find my other work at draftcoburn.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Jimmetrics. And if you like this content and you want more content like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Share this video as well with anybody that you know. Hit that notification button so that you're always reminded when another video of mine drops. And I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.